Some viewers may find this disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Short, scary stories from Reddit. The proposal. When I showed up at my girlfriend's house and asked her to marry me, the first thing she did was slam the door with a terrified look on her face. In hindsight, I guess it was a bad idea to do it the day after my funeral. Selfie. I tell my friends that I don't take selfies because they're for vain, narcissistic people. I don't tell them about the shadowy figure I see in the background of every photo, or how it was getting closer and closer with each shot. I didn't want to be called a child. I remember the fog on the glass of the window, Mum and Dad in the front seat. My Game Boy had died, and besides, it was probably too dark to see it anyway. I remember my hands were covered in a sticky film. I had eaten an apple and its sugary juices had coagulated on my skin. No matter how I licked my fingers and rubbed them on my trousers, the film stayed. My bladder prevented me from napping. Mum and Dad pulled off the highway into a bright gas station. The fluorescent sign hurt my eyes. I squinted and blinked at it. I was old enough to go inside on my own, so I did. I remember the feeling of the cold outside the car, biting and scratching down the back of my neck. My hair stood up. I was scared, but Mum and Dad were looking at a map. It seemed mad. I didn't want to be called a pest, so I zipped up my jacket and turned across the lot. When I got to the door, I pushed it open and looked around. Everything was empty. Blue signage pointed to the bathroom at the back of the store. I wandered over, swooping my gaze across the space, trying to find a clerk. There was a noise, a muffled thumping. Whump, whump, whump. I remember standing very still, the pressure in my bladder forgotten. Whump, whump, whump. It got louder. I looked around, frantic for the clerk, or any grown-up. Whump, whump, whump. It was getting faster, and then it stopped. I got so scared, I ran back out to the car, crying. Mum and Dad had to walk me back inside, holding my hand. When we got in there was a young clerk dozing behind the counter. It was probably the pipes, they would later explain. Water pipes, or an AC system, and I hadn't noticed the clerk. I was being childish, but that wasn't it. The pipes in the air didn't cause the bathroom door to creak open. Thumping water didn't explain the face I saw there, with pale, clammy skin and wide lips, the huge smile that stretched back to her ears, the fat tongue hanging and twisting and drooling, the eyes, all black, tiny balls set in the puffy flesh like twin pinheads in soft fabric, the withered breasts dangling from her hunched torso, the gnarled stick she held, sticky like my hands, but with a dark liquid that shimmered, the whump, 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 as she struck the ground with it. I didn't want to be called juvenile, so I never told them about that part. Never told them what I saw emerging from the bathroom. Problem is, the nearest toilet is inside this dark service station. What's that? Did you say you hear the water pipes thumping? There's no monster in the basement. My son sees monsters everywhere. A night doesn't go by that I don't have to hunt for them in his closet or under his bed. As a busy single dad, I try not to let these requests bother me, but I would be lying if I said they didn't get a little frustrating. Who knew a tiny suburban house could hold so many monsters? This last week, it's been a monster in the basement. Normally, my son doesn't go into the basement, but I'd finished renovating it a few weeks ago, and I needed help moving the boxes back down there. While we were working, he swore he kept hearing something scratching at the walls. Of course, this noise became a monster trying to claw its way through the brickwork. I assured him that monsters weren't real and that it was probably just rats. I'd hoped that would settle things, but if anything, it's gotten worse. Last night, he told me that when he walked past the basement door, he could hear the monster calling his name. This is his mother's fault. You'd think that after 2 weeks walled up down there, she'd accept that she's not getting out and stop this. All she's accomplished is scaring our son and forcing me to reassure him, once again, that there's no such thing as monsters. Sunday lunch. Daniel Luce softly pulled a tender morsel of roast from his fork with his teeth and let a contented smile slip onto his face as he chewed. His mum had outdone herself as usual. Luce tore one of the Yorkshire puddings in half, dabbed at the gravy, chewed, then swallowed. Homemade Yorkshire puddings. None of that frozen Aunt Betty's rubbish. Her talents hadn't slipped all these years. Oops. Luce observed a sliver of gravy had trickled down onto his wrist. Slowly, he ran his tongue along the wrist and soaked up the delicious gravy. He had always been a messy eater. A bugle of nostalgia, tinged with sadness, rose in Luce's narrow chest. Life had been much simpler then. Sunday lunch with a family had been a deeply rooted tradition he'd always recalled with childish bliss. His mum's roast chicken, roast beef and roast pork. God, but the chicken had been the best. Luce just had to go and ruin everything like the stupid boy he had been. Had been, in truth, nothing had changed. Luce picked up the gun that had been tucked neatly next to his plate and sighed, remorse clouding his mind and erasing the earlier happiness he had felt. His mother and father sat opposite him, their food untouched, eyes bulging widely, straining against their gags and ropes that kept them tied to their chairs. His younger brother stared straight at him, hatred blazing in his eyes. Luce could now see the absurdity of what he was doing. It had been 7 years he had been arrested for the murder and sexual assault of 2 teenage girls in a park. It wasn't his fault. His best friend, Matthew, had devised the idea. Really, Luce had scarcely touched the blonde one, and they only killed them to protect his good friend. Yet he would have been the one who'd been caught. It was unfair. All Luce had wanted was one more happy Sunday lunch before he was inevitably caught. He'd even brought the meat. Luce reached into his mouth and pulled out a long strand of ginger hair. How Matthew had screamed as Luce invited him to lunch with a family. The stupid ginger bastard. Hey, is that urban legend here? Remember to like, comment and subscribe if you want more. Sweet dreams.